What do you do if you can't visualize? As we know, visualization and mental rehearsal is a technique that is backed by so much science to help people create success in their lives. But what do you do if you can't visualize? Does that mean that you're never going to create success or that you're never going to manifest? Absolutely not. There are other ways that you can approach the same objective so that you can get the same outcomes as visualization, even if visualization is a struggle for you. And later on, we'll also talk about ways that you can strengthen that visualization muscle as well. So today we have the incredible Dr. Aubrey from our team. She's our team's neuropsychologist that helps us develop all of our programs and certifications at Yes Supply. And she's going to talk about the science behind visualization and other ways that we can approach the topic. So thank you for being here today, Aubrey.
Yeah, amazing. Thanks for having me. This is one of the top questions we get. And I think it's because, Reese, like you mentioned, we talk about on our channel the power of visualization. You hear about that a lot in the personal development world, and it's for a good reason. So we know that when you visualize something happening and you anticipate it and kind of like run like a movie sort of in your mind, for most of us, it turns on our prefrontal cortex. And this is kind of like our planning, decision-making area of our brain. Because it's on, as soon as it needs to recall something or work out a problem, it'll start activating other parts of our brain. So planning areas, emotional areas. And this is why visualization works so well for so many people and leads to something that we call functional equivalence. So we've got a couple cool videos on this channel where we talk about the power of mental rehearsal. Super, super powerful. But for some of us, we do run into issues when we're trying to visualize. So for some people, visualization in general is difficult. Some people tend to actually not see these activations in their prefrontal cortex. And in fact, they need a different kind of stimulation to turn on those areas of their brain. This is pretty common. And the more we do research, it's very inclusive, and we take a look at neurodiverse samples, we see that a lot of us do have differences in the way that we visualize things. And so it's not always the case that it's, challenging for us to visualize. We just might need a little bit of like a boost to really help us get there. And so this question comes up all the time, because if you're working with yourself and you find you're that kind of person that maybe you're a little bit less visual than you expected, or maybe you're a coach who's working with a client and you might realize all of a sudden, oh my goodness, I know these incredible techniques, but visualization is a key part of them, and my client doesn't seem to really lean into that. This video is for you. So a couple of the things that you can do if you're in this situation where you're trying to help yourself or your client visualize is to keep in mind that you can lean on other sensory modalities to help you get there. And so I highly recommend all the time for coaches who are just getting to know their clients for the first time. They're onboarding them, getting to know their histories, their goals, all those sorts of things. It's a really good time to kind of chat with them about ways that they visualize their world or hear their world, feel through their world. And you can get a sense. We teach a lot of these techniques in the SFI method, but in a general sense, you can get a sense of sort of where they're coming from based on what they say, maybe how they react to you. Maybe you find that they're touching themselves a lot. And you can kind of lean into a conversation with them about, okay, maybe what we're going to do for some of these really incredible techniques that we have that are built for visualization. On those days, I might ask you to bring in a blanket from your childhood, or a picture, or an essential oil that you love, or maybe I'll have you bake something before we meet together, right? These sorts of things can help prime us, and priming will turn those parts of your brain on when they otherwise don't turn on. And so getting to know your client in that way can help you come up with sensory substitutions. Another thing that you can do is lean into descriptive language. And this is super, super powerful. You can do something as simple as start using onomatopoeias. I haven't heard that word since like the fourth grade, probably many of us, but words like buzz, right, that elicit this physical reaction because it'll actually line up with the sound that it's referring to. You can use that kind of descriptive language, or maybe focus on language that's, maybe olfactory in nature. So maybe talk about the very lemony smell of like a zest from a lemon, right? And talk about like that zing that you feel when you smell it. We go into detail in the SFI method on how to do this, but that's one general thing I think we all can build into our conversations when we're speaking with someone and they're a little bit less visual. Throwing in those little extra descriptors is really helpful. And I think it's important to note that, because a lot of the times when we're taught in public speaking, or even sometimes with certain coaching modalities, for example, in hypnosis, sometimes we try to chunk up, right? So try to talk about things very broadly so that it appeals to more people. But if you're speaking to someone who's a little bit less visually inclined, you're going to want to get as specific as you can. And so this involves having that conversation and just testing out these different kind of substitutions and descriptors you can add. The sort of like no fail, I think, top tip that I love to use is to lean into metaphors. So worst comes to worst, you might be meeting with a client who has trouble visualizing, or maybe they can visualize, but they've just never seen something before. So maybe, for example, you're working on one of their biggest goals and dreams, and it's just hard for them to really picture what that looks like because they've never seen themselves feeling that calm, that peaceful, that successful, right? One of the ways that you can help them get there is to use metaphors for something that they probably are familiar with and help their mind kind of trick itself into thinking about change, into thinking about that sort of concept. So, for example, I love the idea of talking about the mind as if it's a jungle or a garden, right, that you're tending to. So, if you're meeting with a client and they have difficulty visualizing in their future, maybe guide them into a garden in their mind and say, all right, let's close our eyes and picture that this garden is our inner world, right? We see weeds in some places, we see flowers in some places, we see shadowy areas and bright areas, some places where there's abundance of animals, right? You can help guide them to this idea of what their world potentially looks like inside. And then you can walk them through techniques where you say, okay, every time we inhale, or every time we talk about this subject, we're going to picture pulling out the weeds and clearing out space for more flowers to grow, right? So you can kind of start talking about what you really want to get down to the nitty gritty of. So their hopes and dreams, their goals for themselves. You can start talking about that by using a metaphor to begin with and kind of working with that metaphor throughout a session with them or throughout their entire time with you. And they can really feel into that process. And eventually that visualization is just going to come naturally to them because you're kind of guiding them through step by step to what that picture could look like. So these are, I think, the top 3 things I would suggest doing. As I mentioned, I love that at Yes Apply, we talk about the power of mental rehearsal, but we also talk about the power of being very inclusive and knowing that there's multiple ways to get at any particular goal that you're trying to accomplish. If your goal is to try to visualize something to gain that imagery, you don't need to keep trying the same techniques over and over. You can just try one of these tips and tricks and see if it makes that difference for you. It likely will, and you'll be able to benefit from all those incredible things that can come when you're able to engage in mental rehearsal.
Oh my gosh, I love that. That was so helpful. Oh my gosh, so many good ways that you can approach visualization. One of the things that I love to do as well is think about it like a muscle, right? So, let's say the person is visualizing their dream house, but it's really tricky for them to have that picture. Just think about something that they know that they remember. It's like if I ask you, what does your car look like? Most people will remember their car, or else they would walk by it every time they're in the parking lot looking for it. So they could say, like, oh, yeah, I remember it. And just kind of practice going back and remembering pictures from the past and saying, like, oh, yeah, I do have like an outline of it, or I can kind of bring up the color. And know that the more you do it, you'll strengthen that muscle as well. Don't put too much pressure on yourself for your visualization to be this vivid, perfect image. I think sometimes people think that their visualization has to be as perfect as like an oil painting or like a photograph, when actually sometimes it's okay. Like you can visualize something that's like light or a feeling or a sound or a sense of, and still attract the outcome that it is you want, because you're getting into the energy that it's already done. You're getting the energy of achieving it. So I feel like that can be so purposeful. And one idea you actually brought up to me. So at the SLI method right now, we're doing some research using AI. And Aubrey one time told me about this idea of using AI in our visualization, which I think can be so powerful. So let's just say you're dreaming of going on maybe you want to lead a retreat on a yacht. So you want to have a beautiful yacht, and you want to have a group of people, and you're masterminding and leading a retreat. I was just looking over there, sound like someone's coming in. You're masterminding, leading a retreat. Tell AI to draw you a picture of yourself leading a cool mastermind on a yacht. And there you have it. You have your picture. You can even get AI to put it in first person. And now what you can focus on more is getting into the emotions that you are there in that picture. And that can be so powerful, from taking an idea to something real that you can picture in your mind. So, yeah, thank you so much. But if anyone's listening and you can't get a crystal clear visual, that's okay. If you get the feeling, if you get the sound, if you get the sense, it can still be just as powerful to achieve the outcome. And then another thing that you can do to substitute mental rehearsal is like practice it. So I remember when I used to be nervous about doing sales calls, I would sit in front of the mirror and practice, pretend I'm on a sales call, pretend I hear the client saying, yes, here's my credit card information or whatever. I would practice before I had a speech. I would stand at home with my cue cards or whatever, and I would practice saying the speech. And I just tuned my brain. I rewired the neural pathways to make it totally normal for me to do that. So, that is a great way to get into the energy too. So I love everything that you shared, and thank you so much for bringing all that to us today.
I love it. Yeah, thank you for creating this space, Reese. It's like the more you study this work, the more you realize that the world is changing now with AI, and like the more that we know about how our brains work, it's incredible. And I think it's the best time to get into this work and to understand the power of it. So, yeah.
Absolutely. So, if you're watching right now and you want to dive into this work for your own life, we teach my approach to mental rehearsal inside Yes, It's Yours. So, Yes, It's Yours is a great course to get clear on what it is that you want in your life and take the steps to reprogram your subconscious mind to get there. And then, if you're watching this and you're thinking, I would love to use some of these techniques that they talk about in my coaching. If you are a coach or you're an entrepreneur, you teach people or you lead people, I encourage you to look into the Yes Apply Method Coaching Certification, where we dive deep into how to use all of this work with your clients. So thank you so much for being here with me, Aubrey, and we will see you soon.